Hey guys, tonight we're sailing into the crumbly, crusty world of 18th century piracy, but not the kind you're thinking of. No, tonight you're not chasing treasure maps or swinging from ropes. You're wedged between two smelly sailors in a damp wooden sloop, arguing over the last semi-edible biscuit. The wind howls through the rigging, the deck rocks beneath your feet, and your dinner is, well, it's gray. It was sort of bread once. Maybe. You're not even sure anymore. The air smells of salt, mildew, and feet. You've got one hand on your flintlock, and the other holding a hardtack biscuit that might double as a murder weapon. And believe it or not, this biscuit is about to get you in serious trouble. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is where you are. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You sit on an upturned barrel that smells like old pickles, carefully eyeing your shipmates. They're doing the same because there's only one barrel left with hardtack, and the last guy who took a second piece got elbowed in the ribs so hard he coughed up a tooth. Welcome to pirate life, where gold is imaginary, but biscuit feuds are painfully real. Hardtack, also called ship's biscuit, is what happens when someone says, "Hey, what if we invented a food with a 27-year shelf life, no flavor, and the mouthfeel of a broken roof tile?" And then they actually made it. You bite down. It doesn't crack. It resists like it's daring you. Eventually, your molars manage a crunch, and a tiny, powdery explosion erupts inside your mouth. Congratulations. You've unlocked a new taste sensation. Mold, salt, and regret. This is not an isolated complaint. Historical records tell us that even hardened sailors complained about the biscuits. Some soaked them in seawater or beer just to soften the fossilized crust. Others pounded them into powder and mixed them with grease to make a dumpling. A dumpling in name only. Tonight, your captain is irritable. He hasn't slept. The wind is making everyone seasick. And someone ate an extra biscuit ration. You can feel the tension in the creaking beams. You don't even need to look at the barrel to know it's half empty, or half full depending on your optimism. But optimism doesn't last long on a diet of salted meat and dry biscuit gravel. There's a fight about to start, and it isn't over treasure, women, or revenge. It's over whether the biscuit should be split evenly, or if Big Charles should get an extra share because he needs more to keep up muscle. The ship's boy, maybe 12 years old, maybe 15, no one knows, pipes up with a comment about fairness. Bad move. Charles backhands him with a sleeve still crusty with fish guts. The boy stumbles and someone draws a knife. This is the reality of pirate life most people don't want to imagine. The gunfights and sea chases are exciting, sure, but they're rare. What's not rare? Hunger, pettiness, and that quietly burning rage when someone touches your biscuit. Historians still argue whether these food fights were the main cause of certain mutinies, or just the final straw. But make no mistake, pirates had tempers, and those tempers were often sharpened by starvation and scurvy. You try to tune out the brewing argument, watching as the moonlight flickers on the choppy waves. Somewhere, far inland, someone is probably enjoying a warm pie by a fire. That thought nearly makes you cry. Behind you, someone cracks a stale biscuit in half with the butt of a pistol. It's almost poetic, if it weren't so tragic. Suddenly, the captain appears. A tall man with greasy curls, a velvet waistcoat he hasn't taken off in 3 years, and an expression that says, "Don't test me tonight." He walks straight to the barrel. Everyone watches, holding their breath. He picks up one biscuit, inspects it, sniffs it, grimaces and bites down. The crunch echoes like a gunshot. "Well," he mutters, "that's the last of 'em." A low groan moves through the crew. Not in protest, just shared, exhausted misery. "We make port in 2 days," he continues. "Till then, you chew the old ropes if you're hungry." He's only half joking. Rope chewing isn't unheard of. It's fibrous. As he walks away, a crewmate beside you whispers, "I'd kill for a cabbage." That earns a slow nod from another, who once claimed to have eaten raw onion out of a Spanish officer's sock and liked it. Tonight, You'll sleep with a growling stomach, a thin blanket, and the knowledge that tomorrow morning, someone will probably try to eat part of the sail canvas, just to see. In truth, these biscuit disputes weren't just about food. They were about fairness, status, morale. Food was identity. If you got more, you mattered more. If your biscuit was moldier than someone else's, it meant the ship's cook didn't like you, or that you didn't fight hard enough the night before, or that you were just unlucky. And bad luck was dangerous at sea. So you tuck your biscuit crumb into your shirt pocket, saving it maybe for breakfast, or as currency. You never know who'll trade a story for a nibble of dry, ancient bread. You wake up to the sound of barrels shifting, an ominous thud that echoes through the hull. Your back aches from the planks, your mouth tastes like salt and splinters, and someone nearby is already arguing about breakfast, which, spoiler alert, doesn't exist anymore. Last night's biscuit drama has left the barrel empty. But how did it get here in the first place? You might be tempted to think these biscuits were lovingly baked in a Caribbean galley by a shirtless man humming sea shanties. Nope. Try mass-produced in a damp London warehouse by a government contractor who probably sneezed into the dough. Welcome to the thrilling world of the 18th century naval biscuit supply chain. Try to stay awake, but not too awake. This is bedtime history, after all. It all begins in a place called Portsmouth, or sometimes Plymouth, where His Majesty's Navy, or whoever was pretending to be it, outsourced biscuit production to state-approved bakers. These bakeries didn't make fluffy croissants or fresh loaves. No, they specialized in turning flour and water into indestructible beige bricks. Once baked, the biscuits were dried in vast ovens, left to cool until they resembled discarded masonry, and packed into barrels for the long sea voyage. They were supposed to be shelf-stable. They were also supposed to be rotated regularly. Neither always happened. Pirates, being opportunists, got their biscuits secondhand, either by raiding Navy ships, looting coastal warehouses, or buying them off smugglers who had definitely not watered down the flour with powdered chalk. You think I'm joking, but one ship's manifest listed foreign flour of suspicious texture, which is 18th century code for possibly floor sweepings. Historians still argue whether pirates had any centralized method of storing or distributing food supplies. Most likely, it was chaos. Barrels rolled around with no labels, soaked in bilge water, sometimes mistaken for ballast. One privateer captain even wrote that he couldn't find the biscuit barrel because it had disintegrated and become the floor. You can imagine the joy of opening one of these barrels weeks later, on a ship crawling with rats, only to discover that your meal has merged into a single, moist lump. The crew calls it a biscake. It's like biscuit, but cursed. Now let's talk transit. Once those barrels left the English coast, they were loaded onto ships bound for naval bases, merchant ports, or colonial outposts. From there, they might get intercepted by pirates, hurricanes, or overly curious seagulls. And it wasn't just the English. The French, Spanish, Dutch, and Portuguese all had their own biscuit systems. The Dutch version, scheepsbiscuit, was reportedly softer. Not soft, just not a dental hazard. Still, pirates weren't picky. They'd eat anything that didn't actively fight back. Remember, this was an era without Tupperware, vacuum sealing, or any understanding of mold spores. By the time the biscuits got to your pirate ship, they might have taken on a whole new personality. Greenish fuzz, sour smell, and a tendency to wriggle if left in sunlight. Which brings us to a popular pastime aboard pirate vessels. Biscuit sorting. That's right. You and your crewmates sit in a circle, cracking open dry discs and flicking out whatever larvae might be living inside. It's like fishing, except with tweezers and weevils. If you're lucky, the biscuits are just stale. If you're really lucky, you get one with only dead bugs. You think I'm exaggerating? A sailor once reportedly bit into a biscuit only to find it already hollow. Hollowed out by a family of beetles who had apparently formed their own tiny colony. They were probably planning a mutiny. There's no ration card or schedule, just an understanding. The strongest get first pick. The cook, who has the key to the barrel, is a powerful figure, equal parts chef, judge, and blackmailer. If you cross him, you get the biscuit that looks like it was soaked in old mop water. if you're on his good side. Slightly less hard. What's shocking is how little this system improved over time. The British Navy wouldn't update their food supply logistics significantly until well into the 19th century, and pirates had no HR department. So here you are, curled up beside the barrel that once contained food, listening to Big Charles argue that smelling the biscuits should count as a share. One of the younger sailors disagrees and suggests they go ashore next port and raid the bakery directly. Why raid a bakery? Charles grunts. When we can just steal from the Navy again? Someone chimes in. They've got biscuits shaped like coins now. Fancy. They're still awful, someone else adds. You sigh. You're not even sure you're hungry anymore. Just disappointed. You had dreams of pirate feasts, roasted boar, rum-glazed bananas, platters of stolen delicacies. What you got was brick bread, pickled radish, and a single boiled egg from last month's raid on a fishing village. And let's not forget how food gets repurposed on a pirate ship. The same biscuits that feed the crew are sometimes used to patch holes, throw at seagulls, or wedge open a sticky window. One time, someone used a biscuit as a hammer to fix a loose nail. It worked. Kind of. You watch as the cook hauls a new barrel onto deck. Flour, he announces. The crew groans. They know what that means. More hardtack is coming. The cook sets to work with a smug look on his face. He likes watching people fear his creations. It's around this time that you spot a rat. Not running from the barrel, but toward it. Even the rats have acquired a taste for the biscuits. That's how low you've sunk. You blink awake to a damp breeze carrying the not-so-delicate scent of burnt flour. That can only mean one thing. The cook has attempted to bake again. This time, he's used a makeshift oven fashioned from an old cannon, some bricks, and a lot of blind optimism. A small crowd gathers near the gunwale, staring at the smoking contraption like it might explode, or worse, feed them. You rise, stretch your aching limbs, and shuffle over to get a better look. Sure enough, he's baked a fresh batch of ship's biscuits. They look slightly less like paving stones than yesterday's batch, but you're not about to be fooled. You lean over the edge of the ship's side, watching the gray waves lap lazily below. Behind you, someone coughs loudly. You turn in time to see a crewmate bite into a biscuit and nearly lose a molar. So, he mutters, wincing, these ones are still weapon grade. Despite the culinary catastrophe, you have to give it to the cook. He's consistent. Every biscuit tastes like dust and cruelty. But even these miserable discs are fought over, which is how you end up watching two grown pirates wrestle in slow motion over the last one. There's something oddly poetic about it. One man is barefoot, the other still wearing his left boot backward, and both are using all their strength to claim what amounts to a palm-sized insult. The biscuit crumbles mid-scuffle and is instantly declared neutral territory by the bosun, who's clearly been through this before. The crumbs fall to the deck, where they're quickly scooped up by a kid with long braids and zero shame. 5-second rule, he shrugs. The crew groans, mostly out of envy. But here's the thing, this isn't just desperation. It's also weirdly personal. Back in port, when pirates pooled their loot, they divvied up shares of gold and silver with military precision. But when it came to biscuits, that's where it got emotional. Because, see, gold might make you rich, but biscuits keep you alive. Sort of. You recall a time on a previous ship when a man named Roper hoarded a stash of hardtack in a false floorboard beneath his hammock. For 2 weeks, he slipped off bits at night like a biscuit miser, while the rest of the crew chewed on shoe leather and resentment. When the stash was discovered, no one even argued. They just threw him overboard with a barrel tied to his ankle. Ironically, the very barrel that had once held his biscuits. Historians still argue whether piracy truly operated as an egalitarian system. But one thing's clear. When food is scarce, fairness is fragile. Everyone says they want equal shares until they're hungry. One quiet voice among your crew claims the ship once had a biscuit ledger, a literal logbook that recorded who got what, when. It was lost in a storm, allegedly. Or burned. Or maybe used as emergency bedding for the captain's pet monkey, depending on who's telling the story. Meanwhile, a new rule takes hold. The cook hands out the biscuits while blindfolded, so he doesn't play favorites. It's a flawed system. He still accidentally gives the captain the biggest piece every time. Speaking of captains, yours is currently seated on a barrel, carving a face into his biscuit with a pocket knife. You're not sure if it's art therapy or a warning. Either way, no one dares interrupt him. At least the biscuits are dry this time. That's a win. Yesterday, some were soggy in the middle. Not from underbaking, no, from seawater. The ship took a wave across the deck, and the biscuit crate got drenched. Several crewmates tried to dry them by laying them out on the cannon. Unfortunately, the cannon was still warm. The resulting smell, burnt biscuit, salt, and whatever grease lives in a 12-pounder, lingered for days. One man swore it gave him hallucinations of gingerbread men with knives. Despite everything, biscuits were often customized. Some pirates stamped them with initials, drew on them with burnt stick tips, or carved lucky charms into their surfaces. These were keepsakes of a sort. You even find one tucked in a rigging not later that day, carved with a shaky heart and the word Ma. You leave it there. Some things shouldn't be eaten even on an empty stomach. You're starting to realize that ship's biscuits aren't just food. They're currency, entertainment, artistic medium, and weapon all rolled into one. Their social status, their history, they're the thing you dream about when you can't sleep, and the thing that breaks your tooth when you try. You chew on your own rations slowly that night, lying under a frayed blanket, staring at the stars above the mainmast. One falls, streaking across the sky like a spark from flint on steel. You whisper a wish, not for gold, not for victory, just a loaf of soft bread, maybe with butter, maybe even a little honey. You barely remember what honey tastes like. Someone nearby hums a tune. It's off-key, but calming. Another day on the water, another night with biscuit crumbs on your chest. There's peace in the routine, even if the food makes you question your life choices. And tomorrow, you'll argue about biscuits all over again. Because on a pirate ship, that's just life. The sun barely crests over the ocean horizon when the shouting begins. Again, you peel open one eye and hear the telltale crack of dried wood against a skull. Someone's been whacked with a biscuit. Not thrown, whacked. Which tells you two things right away. One, the cook's latest batch has cooled overnight into its full geological potential. And two, the argument's not about food. It's about fairness. You sit up slowly, bones clicking like rigging in a storm, and survey the scene. Two pirates, let's call them Mudhook and Jory, stand middeck, waving biscuits in each other's faces like tiny shields. Mudhook insists that Jory took an extra share. Jory swears he was making change for a broken biscuit. The crew murmurs around them like a seagull parliament, enjoying the drama while pretending to be neutral. But you know how this goes. This isn't about one biscuit. This is about principle. Because when every meal is a chore, every crumb becomes symbolic. A biscuit isn't just sustenance. It's a marker of respect. And in the micropolitics of piracy, respect is as good as treasure. So what happens when someone takes too much? Well, first there's yelling, then gesturing, then usually a duel. But pirate duels aren't all swords and pistols. Sometimes they're culinary. Historians still argue whether formal biscuit duels ever took place. But you've seen one. Two pirates, blindfolded, each armed with one biscuit and a spoon. First to knock the other's hat off wins. No real injuries, just pride and a lot of crumbs. Jory and Mudhook don't duel. Instead, the bosun steps in. He's ancient, tattooed like a codex, and smells vaguely of brine and tobacco. With a voice like gravel in a bucket, he announces a tiebreaker, biscuit toss. The rules are simple. Each man chooses a biscuit from the communal crate. They step to the rail. One at a time, they throw their chosen disc at the crow's nest. Closest to the mark wins the extra ration. You watch as Mudhook selects a thick, lopsided biscuit with a visible crack. Rookie move. Jory picks a thinner one, smooth, aerodynamic. Someone starts a betting pool. Mudhook heaves his biscuit with a grunt. It sails upward, curves left, and bounces off the mainsail. A few boos. Jory winds up like a cricket bowler and lets fly. His biscuit soars in a perfect arc, clips the edge of the crow's nest, and disappears into the sea beyond. Cheers erupt. He wins the tiebreaker and the biscuit. Mudhook grumbles, but he accepts the outcome. This time, the cook, watching from his flour-dusted perch, nods with approval. Next batch'll be flatter, he says. Better for sport. As the crew disperses, you find yourself reflecting on the odd hierarchy Biscuits have created aboard this ship. Sure, there's the captain, the quartermaster, the gunner. But then there's the biscuit holders, those who store extra in hammocks, crates, and pockets. Everyone knows who they are. And everyone watches them with a quiet, jealous eye. One lad, barely 14, has managed to trade cleaning duty for a half biscuit each day. He's now more respected than two of the actual gunners. Meanwhile, the older pirates cling to rituals. One refuses to eat any biscuit without knocking it against the mast 3 times for luck. Another dips his in seawater for precisely 5 seconds. Too long, it dissolves. Too short, it's just a rock, he explains. One of the few women aboard, nicknamed Wren, carves her initials into each biscuit she receives, then hides them in her coat sleeves to age them before consumption. Takes the edge off, she claims. No one questions her. She's got 4 knives and a pet gull. Among pirates, tradition blends with necessity. It's part ritual, part survival. And sometimes just plain superstition. Like the man who insists his biscuits taste better if he eats them facing east. Or the one who swears the weevils are healthier than salt beef. More protein, he says. You stop sitting next to him at meals. One sailor, the oldest among you, missing most of his teeth, simply swallows his biscuit pieces whole, eyes closed like he's transcending time and space. He hasn't spoken in weeks. Some say he used to be a ship surgeon. Others think he's just deeply at peace with his poor life choices. You try to remember when biscuits became so important. Was it the moment you ran out of dried figs? When someone dropped the only cheese wheel overboard? Or maybe it was when you realized you could survive without gold, without rum, without glory, but not without calories. You take a bite of your own ration, cracks like a pistol shot, sending a flake into your eye. You don't flinch. You're used to it now. You chew slowly, eyes watering, wondering if anyone would notice if you dipped it in the leftover lantern oil. You don't. Yet, as the sun rises higher, the ship lurches into a lazy rhythm. Someone sings a ballad about a ghost ship made of biscuits. Someone else chimes in with a harmony. It's beautiful in a crumbling, half-starved kind of way. And tonight, there'll be another batch, another game, another argument. Because on this ship, treasure is fleeting, but biscuit drama? Eternal. By now, you've stopped expecting variety. Every morning, you wake to the same groan of ropes, the same yawning creak of the hull, and the same smell. A combination of seaweed, damp socks, and, most consistently, scorched biscuit crusts. Today is no different. You shuffle toward the galley with the rest of the crew, each of you praying futilely for even a minor twist on the daily ration. A spice, perhaps, maybe a slightly less tooth-breaking texture. But no, there they are. The morning biscuits, flat, beige, and dead-eyed like a fish with a secret. But here's the twist. Someone has added something to them. You sniff. There's a hint of anise? No, clove. Maybe. The cook beams, as if he's just reinvented cuisine. Found some old spice mix in a jar marked cure for scurvy. Thought I'd try it. You chew with exaggerated suspicion. It's not good, but it's unexpected. The spice turns the biscuit from punishment into puzzlement. Several pirates chew more slowly, as if their mouths need time to process the event. This is the beginning of what some later dub the biscuit renaissance. One man begins to slice his biscuits diagonally, claiming they release fewer crumbs that way. Another starts using a small file to decrust his, creating a sort of primitive crustless tea cake. The youngest crewmate, still missing 2 front teeth from a weevil fight, long story, begins soaking his ration in tea. Well, tea. It's just boiled seawater with citrus peels, but still. You, of course, take the logical next step. You try to toast yours. You wedge a biscuit between 2 warm lanterns and wait. It softens slightly. You take a bite. actually edible. A bit of warmth, a bit of spice, and suddenly you're not a pirate on a damp ship. You're someone sitting fireside, maybe even in a bakery. Briefly, until the lantern catches your sleeve and you remember where you are. Historians still argue whether pirate crews experimented with flavoring their hardtack. Some mention powdered ginger or old beer used to soften biscuits. Others suggest such embellishments were rare, luxuries reserved for captains or exceptionally well-connected quartermasters. But the thing is, pirates were problem solvers. And boredom was an enemy just as persistent as hunger. Which explains the emergence of what one crewmate loudly calls biscuit cuisine. Soon, a small group forms around the idea. They create biscuit nights every few days, times when each pirate must present their own creative take on the ship's rations. Ren uses tar to draw patterns on hers, then peels it off like edible lace. The cook, now drunk on power, drills holes into his biscuits, threads them onto a string, and calls it biscuit beads. No one eats them, but still, even the captain joins in. He layers 3 biscuits with dried fish and calls it a tactical sandwich. You nod politely, though your stomach quietly weeps. There's laughter, of course, especially when someone tries to rehydrate their biscuit using rum. That person passes out halfway through preparation, face down in the bowl, snoring gently. His biscuit dissolves into mush and sticks to his ear. The best invention, though, comes from a quiet man named Keg. He hollows out a biscuit, fills it with seawater and crushed salt pork, then heats it over a lantern. "Pirate pot pie," he declares triumphantly. You take a bite. It's appalling, but inventive. Despite the flavor disasters, morale improves. These aren't just biscuits anymore, they're opportunities. And in a life where most choices are made for you by wind, weather, or the whims of a captain who names his boils, that means something. You begin to dream differently, less about treasure, more about recipes. You start collecting ideas. If you ever make it back to land, maybe you'll open a tavern. The Soggy Crumb, specializing in hardtack 3 ways. Maybe you'll even sell souvenir biscuits with nautical phrases burned into them. Don't chew angry. Soaked is safer. Bite me gently. Your thoughts are interrupted by a crash from above deck. You rush topside and find a parrot flapping wildly, trailing biscuit crumbs like confetti. Apparently, someone fed it a rum-soaked biscuit wedge, and now it's drunk. It lands on your shoulder and promptly throws up. Right onto your breakfast. You sigh. Back to basics. But despite the mishaps, these experiments continue. The galley wall begins to display the Biscuit Hall of Fame. Winners are chosen by applause. The loudest cheer so far? For someone who made a mini biscuit cannon that actually fired crumbs at rats. Effective and entertaining. Rats, by the way, love biscuits, and they've become much braver recently. Last night, one chewed through a hammock to reach a stash. The pirate inside didn't even wake up, just muttered, "Save me the corners," and rolled over. There's talk now of creating a rat tax. If a rat steals your biscuit, it counts as your ration. Harsh, but fair. The rats are part of the ecosystem now. You glance around the deck as dusk falls. Someone strums a fiddle with a biscuit as a pick. Another pirate paints a tiny face on his and props it up like a shrine. And in that moment, you realize something truly absurd. You're starting to like these things. Not the taste, never the taste, but the culture, the routine, the soft crunch beneath the absurdity. Maybe this is how civilization begins, with flour, salt, and endless complaints. It starts with a squeak, barely audible at first, just a faint shuffle under the deck boards. You ignore it. You've got a biscuit to nibble and a sunset to scowl at. But then another squeak, louder, closer, and then a thud, followed by the unmistakable skitter of tiny claws. You freeze mid-bite. The rats have organized. You rush below deck, just in time to see it. A coordinated line of rodents, dragging bits of biscuit across the floor like tiny, furry dockworkers. They've built a nest behind the water barrel using shreds of sailcloth, rope fibers, and, you squint, someone's spare sock stuffed with crumbs. The rats are winning. There's always been an uneasy peace between pirate and vermin, especially at sea. But lately, Something has shifted. The rats aren't just stealing food, they're targeting the biscuit specifically. As if they know. You're not the only one noticing. Wren sets a trap with a hollowed biscuit shell and some leftover citrus peel. It catches nothing, but the trap is rearranged overnight into a tiny recliner. No crumbs left behind. Just attitude. Then someone spots a rat biting through a hanging biscuit charm. It ignores the salted beef hanging right next to it. One pirate, convinced this is war, straps 2 biscuits to his feet and declares himself the Crumb Reaper. He claims it gives him better grip on the rat-chasing missions. It doesn't. Historians still argue whether pirate ships developed complex rat control methods beyond cats. There's little record of organized rodent resistance, but ship logs occasionally mention losses to gnawing or biscuit blight. What they don't capture is the psychological toll. Because these rats, they're not just bold, they're smug. At dinner, one of them strolls across the galley, biscuit crumb in mouth, stops at your foot, sits down and starts nibbling. You stare. It stares back. Neither of you blinks. After that, you start sleeping with your biscuit inside your shirt. The quartermaster suggests creating a rat watch. Each night, 2 pirates stay up in shifts, guarding the rations with broomsticks and loud sneezes. It works for 2 nights. Then the rats simply wait until shift change and swarm the deck like a furry tidal wave. And then disaster. Keg's biscuit stash, the largest private collection on board, is raided. He discovers it at dawn. A hollowed-out crate, filled with rat droppings and crumbs. A single biscuit remains, perched on top like a tombstone. Keg doesn't speak for the rest of the day. Just stares at the sea, gently turning a biscuit in his hands. Things escalate. A bounty is declared. 1 extra ration for every intact biscuit retrieved from the rats. By sundown, a new crew sport has emerged, biscuit recon. Pirates crawling into corners, climbing into barrels, dangling biscuit decoys from ropes like fishing lures. Someone invents a biscuit trapdoor. You're not proud of it, but you build a small fort around your hammock using biscuit tins and twine. You call it Crumb Haven. It lasts exactly 1 night before being chewed through in a targeted midnight assault. The cook finally snaps. He announces the creation of the rat diversion biscuit. It's just like the usual hardtack, but with double the salt and a few drops of rum. Let them have this instead, he says, tossing them behind barrels and into the bilge. Shockingly, it works. For a few days at least. The rats, appeased by their salted tribute, scale back their nightly raids. Peace returns. The crew relaxes, starts adding decorative touches back to their rations. The biscuit nights resume. Even Keg smiles again. But you remain wary, because you've seen it. That look in the rat's eyes. That tiny, biscuit crumb-encrusted glint of ambition. This isn't over. One night, you wake to a soft weight on your chest. You open one eye and meet the gaze of a rat. It's sitting on your sternum like a furry judge, holding a piece of biscuit in its paws. It drops the crumb on your blanket and vanishes. You lie there, blinking, wondering if it was a gift? A warning? You don't sleep the rest of the night. From then on, a silent agreement forms between you and the rodents. You leave out a small corner of your biscuit each morning. In return, they leave your main ration untouched. You think of it as tribute. Others call it weakness. But you don't care, because you're eating full biscuits again. Historians may never know the full extent of the pirate rat biscuit wars. There are no paintings, no poems, no commemorative plaques. But in the damp wood of your ship, in the echo of every midnight crumb skirmish, the legend lives on. You learn to live with them. You even name a few. One with a torn ear and bold strut, you call Admiral Biscuitbane. He accepts your scraps with a nod, like a fellow officer. And somehow, this absurd dance between man and rodent adds one more layer to the strange tapestry of pirate life. Gold? Rare. Rum? Watered. Respect? Fleeting. But biscuits? Biscuits are everything. You wake up one morning to an unfamiliar sound. Not the usual groan of wood or thump of bare feet above. No, this is something far more dangerous. Chewing. You sit up, already on edge, and you see it. A crew member, young, gangly, hair like burnt rope, chewing his own biscuit. But not his daily ration biscuit. This one is sculpted, decorated. It's part of the Biscuit archive, a makeshift shelf near the galley where the best creations of the past month are proudly displayed. There's Keg's infamous salt pork tartlet, the Crumb Reaper's crust armor, even your toasted double stack, admired mostly for its commitment to symmetry. And now this biscuit-eating gremlin has eaten the top layer off one of them. You leap up. Did you just eat the display biscuit? He shrugs. Didn't know it was sacred. The silence is instant and deafening. Every pirate in earshot turns. You've seen mutinies form over less. The cook slowly stands, flour still on his forehead like war paint. We respect biscuit craft on this ship, he growls. The young pirate looks around, suddenly realizing his mistake. I mean, it was dry anyway. A sharp inhale from the crew. This is how the great biscuit ethics debate begins. What was once an unspoken understanding, that one does not consume historic biscuits, now becomes the subject of fierce, whispered arguments. Some believe that once a biscuit has served its aesthetic or morale-boosting function, it should be recycled. Others argue for permanent preservation. One pirate proposes retiring honored biscuits by launching them ceremonially into the sea. Another suggests building a shrine. A third claims we should grind them into powder and use them to mark sacred places on the ship. That one's quickly vetoed. Too many crumbs already. You take the middle road. Maybe we just label them? So begins the biscuit preservation movement. Small plaques are made from broken spoon handles. Each is carved with a name, date, and brief tribute. For example, Keg's crumb-filled casserole. Held together against all odds. May your salt never run dry. With the new plaques, a reverent air settles over the galley shelf. Pirates begin lowering their voices near the display. One even removes his hat as he passes. You chuckle, but you also do the same the next morning. There's something grounding about it. In a life tossed by storms and bad luck, that shelf of imperfect biscuit experiments represents effort, creativity, even hope. Historians still argue whether any pirate ships actually created galleries or shrines to shipboard life. But one account from an 18th century journal references a sacred barrel of curious food items no man dared touch, believed to bring bad luck if disturbed. Maybe it wasn't superstition. Maybe it was respect. Things grow more structured. A weekly biscuit tribunal is formed to judge any breaches of etiquette. Their symbol? A tiny hammer carved from biscuit crust. Offenders are sentenced to light punishments, scrubbing the deck with a biscuit, composing a public apology in verse, or worst of all, receiving a lecture from Keg. He talks for hours. You once watched a man fake his own sleep just to escape. Then comes the biscuit black market. You notice it first during a quiet watch. Two pirates trade in whispers beneath the aft stairs. One produces a cloth pouch. The other opens it reverently. Inside, half of Wren's decorated star crumb from last week's contest. You raise an eyebrow. That's from the archive. They freeze. Turns out, some biscuits have become currency. Rarer, older, or more elaborate designs can fetch favors. First pick of hammocks, extra rum, even skip chores. You try to ignore it. But soon, you find your own prized biscuit, your original toasted creation, missing. A quick investigation reveals it's been traded twice already and is now wrapped in oilcloth. Buried in someone's sock drawer like buried treasure. You confront the trader who shrugs. It's art. Art moves. You don't know whether to be flattered or furious. So you do the only sensible thing. Create a second edition of your original biscuit. Toast it again, carefully layered, crust edges rounded with a spoon. This time, you add a scratch mark on the bottom, your signature. And thus begins the age of biscuit forgeries. Now everyone's trying to recreate their past triumphs. Some earnestly, some to mess with the black market. One pirate even stages an elaborate hoax, pretending his ancestral biscuit was passed down through generations. Turns out he baked it 3 nights ago. But it smells old, so people believe him. Meanwhile, the original archives have had to install rope barriers. One pirate volunteers as a full-time guard. He doesn't even eat biscuits anymore, he just watches, broodingly. And yet, amid the absurdity, something lovely happens. Respect grows. The shelf becomes a place of pause, a quiet corner on a noisy ship. Pirates begin using it to mark birthdays, anniversaries of joining the crew, or especially lucky raids. The biscuits grow more elaborate, some with powdered citrus decorations, others baked into vague shapes of sea creatures or lovers left behind. One morning, you pass the shelf and notice a new addition. A biscuit with your name scratched gently into its surface. You don't know who made it, but you feel it deep in your salty, biscuit-weary soul. Maybe you're not just surviving out here. Maybe you're belonging. Somewhere between the equator and nowhere in particular, a new tradition emerges. It's called the Biscuit Duel. No one really remembers who started it, though Half-Ear insists it was him, and Keg claims it was inspired by an old naval officer's quarrel. But the idea is simple. When two pirates disagree, whether over hammock space, storytelling rights, or who ate the last sliver of lemon peel, they each bake a biscuit. Then the crew votes. Winner keeps bragging rights. Loser eats their own creation, no matter how awful. You witness your first duel during a humid afternoon lull. The air's so still it feels like chewing steam. Wren and Slab argue over who caught the flying fish that flopped onto the deck that morning. Naturally, it escalates. An impromptu biscuit station is set up on a flat plank near the bow. Salt, flour, brackish water, and whatever toppings can be bartered. Wren uses slivered almond from a wedding trunk they raided last month. Slab crumbles dried seaweed into his dough. They present their biscuits on a scrap of sailcloth. Wren's is delicate, almost elegant, with a crisp edge and shiny glaze of, wait, is that boot polish? Slab's is thick, square, and steaming suspiciously. You nibble. The almond adds an oddly floral tang. The seaweed? Not so much. Wren wins. Slab eats his biscuit with a grimace so theatrical you'd think he was chewing cannonballs. The dual concept catches on faster than scurvy in an orange shortage. Now, grievances become performances. One pirate composes a limerick while kneading dough. Another arranges his biscuit like a tiny ship, complete with toothpick sails. A few start painting their creations with tinted whale grease to add flair. The duels become events. You're appointed flour marshal, responsible for rationing out baking supplies fairly. It's a position of power, and one you abuse mildly by reserving a bit of extra dough for private experiments. You try layering biscuit pieces with mashed dates and lemon zest. The surprisingly edible. Historians still argue whether pirates had formalized rituals to resolve disputes. Most records emphasize violence, but personal diaries occasionally mention showdowns of craft or displays for crew amusement, hinting at more playful resolutions. Could biscuit duels have been one such outlet? One duel stands out. A crewmate known only as Flinch, a jittery, thin fellow with a fear of loud birds, challenges broadmouth Becky over hammock territory. No one expects much. Becky's known for her spicy anchovy biscuits. Flinch mostly eats. But when Flinch presents his creation, the deck falls silent. It's not flashy. It's simple, round, golden brown with a faint hint of citrus. But when you bite into it, it melts. Somehow soft in the center without crumbling. Even Becky can't hide her awe. He wins. From that day, Flinch becomes the biscuit whisperer. Pirates start seeking his advice. He speaks rarely, but when he does, it's about yeast timing and heat distribution. You once catch him staring at the galley oven like a prophet at a volcano. And with Flinch's rise, the duels evolve again. Now, they include categories: texture, presentation, aroma, even backstory. A pirate wins one duel after weaving a dramatic tale of star-crossed lovers and symbolizing their tragedy in crumbled crust and burnt edges. The biscuit tastes terrible. The story? Sublime. You try your hand at storytelling too. You bake a biscuit shaped like a tiny spyglass, inspired by your late-night watches. It has a cinnamon swirl center, slightly burnt edges to represent loneliness, and a crack down the side you describe as emotional fracture. You lose to a pirate who just stuck a raisin in the middle and called it the captain's eye. Sometimes simple wins. As the weeks roll on, the biscuit duel becomes the highlight of ship life. Arguments are now looked forward to, even encouraged. Someone fakes a disagreement just to trigger a baking round. You catch Keg muttering, "I don't even like raisins," just loud enough for someone to challenge him. He loses graciously. The duels begin attracting spectators. A few times, when you pass other ships, you swear you see faces peering through spyglasses, curious about the commotion. You briefly consider hosting an intership duel tournament. But then you remember, you don't actually want other ships near yours. Biscuit secrets are sacred. One evening, a duel ends in a tie. The crew, baffled, holds an emergency meeting. After a heated debate, someone suggests the bite-off, a test of whose biscuit can survive one full bite without crumbling. The crew bites, crumbs are counted, and victory is declared with a slow, respectful chew. You start dreaming about biscuits. You wake up muttering spice pairings and crust ratios. Once, you catch yourself reaching for a pouch of salt in your sleep. Biscuit fever has taken hold. But despite the obsession, something unexpected happens. The arguments on board decrease. The mood lifts. Pirates laugh more. They collaborate, swapping crust tricks and salt-drying methods. The act of biscuit dueling, absurd as it is, becomes a way to connect. A form of self-expression in a world of grime and cannon smoke. Historians might reduce pirate life to maps, mutiny, and buried treasure. But you know now, true status was earned not just through strength or cunning, but by the snap of your crust, the glisten of your glaze, and whether your biscuit could move a man to tears. You can't quite remember when it started, but the biscuit duels gradually gave way to something even more unexpected. Biscuit philosophy. It begins when old Jasper, one of the oldest pirates aboard, known mostly for his habit of sleeping with his eyes open, takes a bite of a particularly bland biscuit during a casual duel and mutters, "This biscuit, it's like life, dry, hard, but with just enough salt to make you keep chewing." Everyone laughs, but then someone nods. "Yeah," says Short-Tooth Gill. And you never know if there's weevils in it until it's too late. A new pastime is born, biscuit wisdom. Pirates start using biscuit metaphors to explain everything. You're told once during a watch shift that relationships are just two biscuits in the same barrel. Eventually you soften each other or go stale together. Someone else describes ambition as chasing the ever-crunchy crust, knowing full well the middle's always doughy disappointment. You chuckle, but it kind of makes sense. Soon, biscuits are no longer just food, currency, or competition. They become symbols, tiny, flower-based frameworks through which your crewmates process life, love, death, and occasionally indigestion. You wake one morning to find a scroll pinned to the mast with a biscuit nail. It's a list titled The 12 Biscuit Truths. No one knows who wrote it, but within days it's copied, recited, and debated over late-night watches like scripture. You remember a few. Every biscuit starts the same, flour and water, but becomes different with fire. A burnt biscuit still feeds a man, though he may not thank you. Biscuit crumbs tell no lies. There's even a short-lived cult that worships the Great Crumb, a hypothetical primordial biscuit that supposedly crumbled into the universe. They chant in flower circles and try to bake without using their hands, claiming purity of form. It's ridiculous. And yet, when they offer you a triangle-shaped biscuit made with fermented mango peel, it's the best thing you've tasted in weeks. One evening, a storm hits. Lightning splits the sky like divine temper. Rain slaps the deck. Sails whip violently. It's the kind of storm that makes you feel like a biscuit in boiling stew. Fragile and entirely out of your depth. In the galley where the fire barely stays lit, someone bakes. You can smell it between gusts of sea-soaked wind. Warmth, spice, the faint sweetness of something stolen long ago from a Portuguese merchant. No one says anything, but you drift toward the scent. Inside, half the crew is huddled, silent, watching Flinch calmly stir dough with a spoon carved from whale bone. He doesn't speak. He doesn't need to. You sit. Someone passes you a small, steaming biscuit. It's soft, crumbly, tastes like cinnamon, orange peel, and faint regret. You eat in silence. The storm howls. The ship groans. and you chew slowly, like it might keep the world together. Historians still argue whether pirates ever developed unique coping rituals during long voyages. While logs mention sing-songs and gambling, there's a curious number of references to galley circles and flower gatherings in letters home. Perhaps biscuit making wasn't just sustenance, it was survival of the soul. By the time the storm passes, the ship is soaked but mostly intact. A few ropes need replacing. A sail hangs torn like a flag of surrender. But morale? Higher than ever. And so, a new ritual is born: storm biscuits. Every time the sky threatens a tantrum, someone heads to the galley. Flour is passed. Salt is measured. And biscuits are baked. Not to fill stomachs, but to calm hearts. Even the captain starts attending. He doesn't bake, he just watches. Occasionally, he mutters advice. Less salt. More kneading. One night, he breaks silence and tells a story of a biscuit baked by a friend lost in battle. He keeps a fragment of it in a pouch around his neck. You never look at biscuits the same way again. They've become maps, memories, monuments. One day, a crew member carves a small plaque and nails it near the galley. We are all just biscuits. Try not to crumble. No one questions it. You start saving your favorite crumbs in a small pouch. Just to feel like something lasted. Just to remind yourself that even the smallest piece can be part of something beautiful. You're not sure what's happening to you, but you think you're becoming a biscuit romantic. And somehow that's okay. You're standing at the stern one slow afternoon, staring out at a sky so flat and gray it looks baked from chalk, when a wild idea breezes through the galley door. Let's open a biscuit tavern. First, it sounds like a joke. Probably is a joke. One of Dandy Pete's sleep-deprived quips. But the seed plants itself. Someone sketches a name on the inside of a water barrel. The Crumb and Compass. And by sunset, you're holding a plank sign. You spend the next 3 days turning a corner of the lower deck into the ship's first, and likely only, floating biscuit pub. It's absurd, but then again, so is everything else. Ropes become curtains. Rum crates make excellent stools. A dangling lantern is transformed with sea glass panels into mood lighting. One pirate finds a cracked bell and mounts it above the galley hatch. It becomes the tavern bell, rung at dusk. No one expected pirate life to include interior decorating, but here you are, debating tablecloth materials with someone named Gutbucket. Historians still argue whether pirates made serious efforts to recreate onshore comforts aboard their ships. Most focus on grog and music, but a few obscure logbook entries mention lower-deck saloons or barrel feast corners. Could these floating biscuit taverns really have existed? Well, yours does. Your elected barkeep. Why? Probably because you have neat handwriting and once managed to bake 3 biscuits without setting off the fire alarm bell. The crew carves you a nameplate, the Crumbsmith. You create a biscuit menu. It's simple, but descriptive. The Sea Dog's Comfort, buttery, soft, with a bit of citrus and salt. Storm Eater, black pepper biscuit made during last week's squall. Ghost Crumb, made from flour aged in rum barrels and regret. There's even a Captain's Special, which changes weekly and has never once been the same biscuit twice. Pirates love it. They lounge in your makeshift tavern after long shifts, nibbling slowly, pretending to sip from cups filled with tepid tea, rainwater, or dreams. One night, a crewmate writes a song about the crumb and compass. Another writes a play, featuring a tragic love story between a baker and a sea serpent. It's terrible. You host a performance anyway. A few pirates start dressing for the occasion. Not full regalia, just biscuit-themed accessories. A sash with tiny stitched pastries. A hat feathered with straw shaped like wheat stalks. Flinch wears a necklace of fake golden biscuit medallions. They clink gently when he nods. You create house rules. No fighting inside the biscuit tavern. Every pirate gets 1 free biscuit per storm. Any duel must be resolved by bake-off or barred-off. No judgments on unusual flavor pairings. You learned that one after someone used pickled eel bits. Of course, some biscuits still go horribly wrong. Once, Keg tries to infuse his dough with old lime peel and coal dust. The result tastes like citrus despair and leaves a residue on your teeth you're pretty sure qualifies as medically concerning. You serve it with a smile anyway. Notes of shipwreck, you say. One morning, you open your Biscuit tavern to find a note tacked to the mast. The Queen's Navy doesn't have Biscuit taverns. That's why they're miserable. No one signs it. You suspect slab. One evening, you hold your first open mic night. The idea being pirates can come share their biscuit thoughts or pastry poetry. It's weird. Beautifully weird. A woman named Shell recites a sonnet about crusts and mortality. Another pirate performs interpretive dance about soggy biscuits and betrayal. Someone just yells cinnamon 3 times and bows. You clap anyway. The captain attends, silent as usual, sipping from a chipped mug. At the end of the night, he leaves behind a folded piece of parchment. Inside is a drawing. The ship, a biscuit moon overhead, and a small sign on the deck reading, "The Crumb and Compass." It's childlike, lopsided, strangely touching. You hang it behind the galley. Historians often reduce pirate ships to floating machines of violence. They forget, or maybe never knew, that humans crave softness, even in the salt-soaked chaos of the sea. That biscuits, humble and crumbling, could become a kind of emotional glue. But you know, the crumb and compass becomes a quiet legend. You overhear whispers from new crew joining from other ships. Is it true they've got a biscuit bar? Do they really serve warm ones? What's a ghost crumb? You just smile and keep baking. Because out here, on the edge of nowhere, with only salt wind and gull cries for company, you've helped create something rare. Not a port, not a fortune, but a place where the crust is always just right, the crumbs are shared, and even pirates can feel a little bit home. The Crumb and Compass isn't just a tavern anymore. It's an institution. You wake one morning to find someone has installed a guest book, a battered ledger with pages made from stitched-together maps and old letters. Pirates now scribble reviews like, "Crust was transcendent, slightly overbaked, but so's my life. Pegleg Joni. I came for the biscuit. I stayed for the existential crisis. Possibly Carl. Please stop putting pickles in sweet dough." To everyone, even the captain scrawls something once. Just 2 words, "Good crumbs." You nearly weep. You start getting requests. Not demands, not orders, but quiet, polite notes slipped under galley pots or tucked into flour sacks. Any chance of a rosemary sea biscuit? Reminds me of my ma. Could we try sweet potato and clove? For warmth. Something green. Don't ask why. You oblige, of course. Because here, flavors are feelings, and every biscuit tells a story someone can't quite say out loud. One night, a shipmate named Nibs brings you a box. Inside is flour, fine, golden, warm to the touch. "Stolen it off a spice ship near Goa," he says, grinning. "Thought you'd make something weird with it." You do. You bake the Eastern flake, infused with cardamom and a hint of dried mango. It vanishes in minutes. And then comes your proudest creation, the midnight crumb. You bake it only during new moons, using ingredients gathered or traded over the previous month. Charred fig, anise, a mysterious moon powder from a traveler who swore it came from a crater. It's inky black, soft as a whisper, and leaves a faint sparkle on your fingertips. No one knows what's in it. Everyone agrees it's magic. Soon, pirates from other ships try to visit. A friendly Dutch crew anchors nearby and rows over, holding out a small cask of butter like an offering. "We've heard rumors," their quartermaster says. You serve them the gentle buccaneer, oat, lemon, sea salt. They leave full, laughing, and a little confused. Historians still argue whether pirates ever developed diplomatic rituals through food. Most records cite rum and trade, but biscuit diplomacy remains a fringe theory. A few letters between rival captains even include hand-drawn biscuit icons next to peace offers. Coincidence? Maybe. Your tavern becomes neutral ground. 2 feuding crews arrive one afternoon, each armed and scowling. But the Crumb and Compass has rules. No weapons, no yelling, only crumb sharing. You seat them at opposite ends, serve identical biscuits. The reconciler, cinnamon, plum, and crushed walnut. By sunset, they're playing dice. One pirate performs a flute solo no one asked for. Someone else starts a conga line. Peace, it turns out, smells faintly of nutmeg. You adapt. To keep things interesting, you launch biscuit-themed nights. Tuesdays become savory bites. Thursdays host experimental crumbs, often a disaster. And Sundays are strictly soft only for maximum comfort. You even hold a biscuit ball once, a formal event where everyone wears something ridiculous. Gutbucket dons a powdered wig made of salted noodles. You bake tuxedo-shaped pastries. There's dancing. Somewhere in the galley, you catch sight of the captain, gently tapping his foot. The crumb and compass thrives not because of its biscuits, but because of its permission. Permission to slow down, to feel, to laugh at yourself, to sit quietly with your salt-stained thoughts and nibble on something that says, "You're still here. You've survived." But there are challenges. You run low on flour during a drought month. You experiment with crushed hardtack, powdered beans, and despair. The results are chewy, chalky, and slightly offensive to the senses. The crew still eats them. You made soup crackers, someone says, gnawing on a piece. I made survival, you reply. Still, you miss the real stuff. And so, during your next port stop, a few crewmates stage a flour raid, trading trinkets and half a songbook for sacks of soft wheat flour and something labeled mystical sea millet. You throw a feast when they return. Dozens of fresh biscuits, some with warm apple and burnt sugar, others with clove and black pepper, fill the galley air with love and memory. Everyone grabs seconds, then thirds, then quietly takes one more to tuck into their pocket for later. A few days later, someone dies. It's quiet, sudden. No cannon fire or battle cries, just a fall from the rigging and a snapped neck. His name was Marlin. Not loud, not particularly known, but he once told you the crumb and compass was the first place he'd ever been warm. You bake one last biscuit in his honor. You don't label it, but you leave it on the shelf next to a carved wooden fish he once made. No one eats it. It just stays. The biscuit becomes sacred. Some pirates begin a tradition. If they lose someone, they bake one biscuit and set it on the shelf. Over time, it becomes a soft, crumbling graveyard of memories. Sweet, savory, unspeakably weird, but all honored. Historians will never know this part. The tenderness, the quiet reverence, the biscuit shelf for the fallen. But you do. And every time you bake now, you measure carefully. You bake slower. And when someone asks what the new flavor is, you just smile and say, something that remembers. Rain drums softly on the deck. The sea's been gentle for days. No storms, no sightings, just pale clouds dragging their heels across a bruised sky. The kind of calm that makes pirates twitchy. But not you. Not anymore. You've got biscuits to bake. This morning's batch is ambitious. A nutty cardamom crumble layered with dried pear slivers and just a pinch of powdered clove. You call it the seafarer's regret. Nobody asks why. They just take one and stare out at the mist like they're remembering someone they probably shouldn't. The crumb and compass now boasts its own logo, carved by Flinch into a bit of driftwood. A compass rose with a biscuit at the center. It's lopsided, yes, and looks suspiciously like a wheel of cheese. But no one's changing it. Tonight is Story Biscuit Night. The concept's simple. Each pirate brings a tale true, embellished, or wildly impossible. And you serve a biscuit inspired by it. Last week, a one-eyed sailor described a dream of flying dolphins who offered him buttered toast in exchange for secrets. You served a flaky kelp biscuit with a salted butter core. It was divisive. Tonight, it's Mad Isa's turn. She talks about the time she once found a beach made entirely of bone-colored pebbles, each one humming at night. Whether she dreamed it or hallucinated it or actually lived it remains unclear. You serve up the pebble biscuit. White sesame, a dab of lemon, and a rough texture that crunches like dry sand. She takes one bite and whispers, "Perfect." Historians still argue whether pirates truly believed in sea legends. Sirens, ghost ships, islands that moved. But you think the truth is simpler. After enough weeks at sea, everything feels possible. especially when the sea fog tastes like sugar and sorrow. Word of your tavern has spread. A British merchant vessel offers safe passage if you'll bake them something with saffron. You trade a batch of golden buccaneers for 6 barrels of cider and a mystery seed. That seed later grows into a weird vine that wraps around the mast and flowers tiny edible blossoms that taste like cucumber and cinnamon. Naturally, you bake with them. You call it mast bloom shortbread. You also begin a ledger, the big book of bizarre ingredients. So far, it includes whale salted butter, too fishy. Powdered narwhal horn, doesn't exist, but Keg swears it improves crunch. Crystallized seagrass, looks better than it tastes. Captain's tears, a fancy name for condensed fog water caught on the rigging. You become an accidental chronicler. People come to you with their stories, not just for the flavor, but because somehow the biscuits make it easier to say things. Like how Sour Ben misses the pine trees of home. Or how Jojo once sang at the royal court before taking to the sea after an incident involving plum wine and a bishop's wig. You listen. You bake. You turn grief into dough and loneliness into glaze. You start a small ritual on rainy days. The wet biscuit hour. Everyone gets a soft, warm biscuit, often with ginger or molasses, served in silence while the sea hisses around the hull. It's peaceful, sacred. And then one evening, you notice someone carving a name into the galley wall. The Crumb and Compass crew. At first, you think it's graffiti, but then others add to it. Not names, not ranks, just words. Bits of biscuit flavors they liked best. The weirdest ones. The ones they ate after storms. The bad idea ones that still made them laugh. Storm Eater. Fig and Regret. The one that smelled like my aunt's parlor. That charcoal disaster that Keg loved. The wall fills slowly, like a mosaic of crumbs and memory. Somewhere out there, the British Navy still chases shadows. Merchants still whisper about pirates with biscuit menus. Scholars still pore over maps, looking for treasure. And here you are, writing love letters in flour. But not all sweet. One morning, your oven breaks. Not explodes, just quits. The iron cracks along the base, and no heat holds. Panic stirs. For the first time in months, the galley feels hollow. You try baking over a fire pit. Everything scorches. You try no-bake biscuits. They're sad. You even try drying dough in the sun, but seagulls make off with half the tray. The ship quiets. No crumb and compass. No laughter, no biscuit poetry, no weird flavor bets. Even the fights seem more tired. Desperate, you dig into your flour sack and bake one last biscuit over an open flame. It's uneven, ugly, half raw in places. You serve it anyway. The crew gathers silently. Each pirate takes a piece. They chew slowly, and then Slab grins. Tastes like mutiny and childhood, he says. Laughter erupts. Someone hugs you, and that night the captain calls for a meeting. Not about loot, not about storms, but about building a new oven. Together, from scratch. You design it as a crew. One pirate finds volcanic stone at the next island. Another rigs a chimney out of a busted spyglass. Someone else swears she once apprenticed with a baker in Florence. Turns out she knows how to shape the hearth dome. The oven is perfect. You name it Biscuit Forge Alpha. It has a faint crack in the back wall, which makes all the biscuits come out just slightly uneven on one side. You call it character. The crew calls it magic. And the Crumb and Compass? It reopens with a new motto. We rise. We bake. We eat. The ocean is glassy today, stretched out under a sky so blue it almost feels fake. Like someone painted it just for you. Inside the galley, heat blooms from the new oven. You've just pulled out a batch of cinnamon drift bites, still hissing from the steam trapped in their centers. Slab's already eaten 3, leaving a trail of sugar across the deck like a breadcrumb path for future generations. The Crumb and Compass is thriving. Someone made a tiny chalkboard for a menu. It hangs slightly crooked above the doorway, and every morning you write the day's offering in your best sailor scrawl. You even add an optional emotional pairing suggestion. Salted honey scones pairs well with forgiveness. Charred pecan flats, best enjoyed with unresolved longing. Dried cherry biscuits, great for staring off dramatically into the sea. One pirate reads them religiously and insists he's undergoing biscuit-based therapy. "You're fixing me," he whispers one morning, cradling a half-eaten molasses wheel, one crumb at a time. Historians still argue whether pirates suffered widespread emotional burnout. They cite stress from naval chases, poor hygiene, existential dread, and chronic scurvy. But oddly, no records mention biscuit-induced introspection. Scholars may never catch up. Today's special is lime and pepper crumblers. Bold, slightly confusing, exactly like this crew. While you prep dough, Nibs arrives breathless. There's a ship, bright red sails. No flag. A hush falls. Red sails are bad news. Rumors swirl around such ships. Ghost crews, treasure curses, cannibal captains. Most say it's nonsense. Others say they've seen them. The captain squints through the spyglass. They're coming fast. You don't panic. You bake. You throw together the red flake, pomegranate glaze, rye crunch, chili flakes. Spicy. Defensive. A statement biscuit. The galley rocks slightly as the other ship draws near. The pirates crowd the rails, hands nervously on cutlasses, staring as the crimson-sailed vessel pulls alongside and stops. The figure appears. A woman, lean as a dagger, stands on the deck. She holds up a large basket filled with biscuits. The crew stares, dumbfounded. She shouts, "We come in flavor." You exhale. Turns out, it's the Crumbed Mare, a rival pirate ship turned traveling bakery. Their cook, Tamsin the Flower Storm, once defected from the British Navy to pursue the ideal chew. You invite them aboard. There is a biscuit summit. You trade bites. They present a citrus leaf shortcake you admit is nearly perfect. You counter with the cocoa whisper, a soft, bittersweet biscuit infused with crushed cacao and a hint of sea fennel. Tamsin tears up. It tastes like regret, but in a good way. Together, you host the first annual High Seas Biscuit Expo. Pirates from 3 other ships anchor nearby after catching the scent of cinnamon and mutual weirdness. Gutbucket sets up a free compliments stand. Slab runs a dunk tank filled with warm milk. A tiny pirate plays lullabies on a flute made from biscuit tins. It's chaos. Glorious, drowsy chaos. The captain, standing by the helm, mutters, "Never thought peace would smell like vanilla." You smile. Later that night, as ships drift apart, you're left with a gift from Tamsin. A rare ingredient called ash sugar, collected from volcanic vents. It tastes smoky, sweet, and vaguely magical. You begin experimenting. One biscuit turns out entirely black. So black it absorbs light. You name it the Eclipse Biscuit and declare it perfect for nights when you want to disappear quietly into yourself. The Crumb and Compass now has a wall map with little biscuit-shaped pins marking where your recipes have reached. A French island near Martinique. Noted, liked the lemon thins. A hidden cove in Sumatra. The pepper oats were a hit with the parrots. A fortress in North Africa. Traded almond crumbs for spices and poetry. You didn't mean to start a food empire. But sometimes empires rise in the softest places. And then, one morning, the oven doesn't work. Not because it's broken, but because there's no fire. You check the woodpile. Gone. The galley's cold. Slab shrugs. Used it all for Gutbucket's puppet stage. You sigh. Dramatically. But before frustration bubbles up, something clicks. You gather the crew and ask for ideas. They offer. Driftwood, too soggy. Chair legs, no. A sacrificial pile of old love letters. Tempting, but no. Eventually, Jojo suggests sun biscuits. You laugh. We don't have an oven made of sun. But you do have hot iron plates, a mirrored spyglass, and way too much time. So begins the era of solar baking. You rig a reflective funnel, harness the afternoon light, and slowly roast a flatbread biscuit on the deck. Takes forever. Smells odd, but it works. You name it the Patience Biscuit. Thin, warm, honest. And that's what the Crumb and Compass becomes known for. Honest food, weird methods, unexpected warmth, and a crew that believes, maybe foolishly, that the way to survive pirate life isn't more gold. It's more biscuits. The wind has changed again. It brings a breeze that smells faintly of mangoes, sea salt, and something unplaceable, like wet rope that's been kissed by lightning. You're not sure where it's blowing from, but it makes your scalp tingle in a good way. Today, you're making fortune biscuits. Not the kind with pre-written messages, yours are more intuitive. You let the dough tell you what to add. Some come out with a single dried fig in the center. Others with 3 sugar crystals tucked like tiny runes. One has a perfect peanut embedded at a 17-degree angle. You write nothing down, but the crew swears the biscuits know things. Sour Ben eats one and then decides to forgive his brother, whom he hasn't seen in 20 years. Jojo eats hers and vows to never again wear shoes on a Tuesday. Flinch eats 2 and immediately learns how to juggle. You're not saying they're magic, but you're also not saying they're not. Historians still argue whether pirates had belief systems beyond standard maritime superstitions. Mermaid omens, unlucky bananas, ghosts in the mizzenmast. Some scoff at the idea of biscuit prophecies. But then again, most historians haven't seen what happens when you bake cardamom on a waning moon. One evening, a ship approaches with no sails and no sound, just gliding. Its figurehead is carved like a sleeping woman. As it nears, the crew holds their breath. On deck is a single man, pale, silent. He carries a crate, and when he steps aboard, he says just one thing. "I heard you make biscuits worth dying for." Then he opens the crate. Inside, tea. Dozens of pouches. Black, green, smoky, floral. Rare leaves from inland caravans, harvested by candlelight, dried under moonlit silk tents. He bows once, wordlessly, and leaves without another word. The crew stares at you. You stare at the tea. You get to work. The result? The steeped silence biscuit. Black tea butter, dusted with bergamot sugar, finished with a whisper of lemon rind. It's the quietest biscuit you've ever made. Not in taste, in presence. You bite it, and everything slows. Even Slab starts whispering after one. You expand. A chalkboard appears outside the galley, now serving biscuits and tea. Pairings offered. Daydreams welcome. You set up cushions on the deck. No weapons allowed. Just mugs, soft rain sounds, and crumbed laps. It's like a floating bakery monastery. Eventually, the captain starts calling you the ship's soul. You snort, but secretly you don't hate it. The crumb and compass isn't just a kitchen anymore. It's a rhythm, presence, a pause in a world of noise. It has gravity. Then comes the biscuit duel. It starts when a visiting cook from another pirate crew, fancy apron, smug face, claims his almond thins are superior in texture and emotional arc. You disagree. Politely, first. But soon, both crews are on deck, arranging biscuit samples, developing a judging rubric, and arguing over whether citrus notes count as cheating. You present the almond afterthought. He counters with mirth and marzipan. Judging commences. Blindfolded, of course. After much discussion, 3 tiebreaker nibbles, and 1 emotional breakdown from a taster who just remembered my mother's laugh. The verdict comes in. A draw. Both biscuits deemed texturally enigmatic. You shake hands. He asks for a job. You say, "We don't hire." Then add, "But you can knead." He stays. You're now co-running the crumb and compass with a man known as Pastry Jack. Together, you invent seafoam lace wafers, morning crumbles, ginger regret puffs, the 3 a.m. oat sigh, and the legendary black ship biscuit, so crumbly it collapses mid-bite, forcing philosophical reflection. The galley becomes a laboratory. You experiment with low-heat overnight bakes, cold biscuits made from seawater brine, air-dried dough infused with starfruit essence. Pastry Jack invents biscuit origami, where cookies fold into edible fortune shapes. You invent nap-compatible snacks. No crumbs, no crunch. One of them is just called Cloud Bite. Then come the letters. A flock of message birds lands on the mast, one tied to each leg. You unroll the scrolls. Heard you have biscuits that heal the heart. My sister speaks of your plum pockets with reverence. Please send 6 molasses doldrums and a sea lullaby. The crew watches you. You look at the oven. And that's how the crumb and compass postal biscuit service begins. Each biscuit is wrapped in parchment, labeled with emotional instructions, and tied to birds with surprising obedience. You send mint meditations to a monk on a lighthouse, rum-glazed goodbyes to a retired sea captain with shaky hands, the childhood vanilla to a boy who's never left shore. One day, you find a note on your cot. You fed me more than food. Anonymous. You bake in silence that day. Just flour, water, memory. You call it the quiet crumb. Somewhere off the coast of nowhere, a storm whispers instead of roars. It's the kind of sky that hums low in your chest but never breaks. A suspended breath above a silver sea. You're standing at the edge of the deck, apron streaked with flour, biscuit tin under one arm. Inside the tin, the goodbye batch, baked at dawn. Vanilla, nutmeg, and a touch of salt. Like tears, but warmer. Why? Because someone is leaving. Nibs. Not because of mutiny or boredom, but because she's found land she likes better than water. A small cove where parrots shout poetry and the trees smell like cinnamon. She wants to open a treehouse library. And somehow that feels exactly right. The crew is gathered. Even Slab has polished his boots. Jojo is holding back tears, poorly. Gutbucket made a lute from driftwood just to play a single off-key chord. You pass around the biscuits. They crumble gently, warm and soft, like they already miss you. Nibs takes hers last. She bites, chews, smiles, and says, "This one tastes like home." You wave as she sails away. She waves back. The tin is tucked under her arm like a sacred scroll. Later, you find a note on your pillow. Don't stop baking. Ever. And you don't plan to. But things do slow down. The sea's calm. The sails sag with ease. Even the parrots sleep more. You start baking quieter things. Fog biscuits, they melt on the tongue. Tide nibbles. Vanilla and driftwood essence. The nap biscuit. Eaten in bed. Crumbs be darned. Pastry Jack invents time biscuits. They take exactly 2 minutes to chew every time. Slab, somehow, becomes your sous chef. Turns out he makes amazing caramel. One day, the captain visits the biscuitorium. She doesn't say anything, just eats a honey-glazed memory crumb, gives a tiny nod, and leaves behind a bottle of wildflower syrup. Historians still argue whether pirates ever formed emotional support kitchens. Most say no. But in the lower corner of one ship's log, barely visible beneath a spill of tea, there's a line. We baked until the sea grew soft again. Time moves. Seasons blur. Your biscuit archive grows. You catalog by mood, memory, moon cycle. You experiment with invisible icing. Write an opera in lemon zest on parchment paper. Sleep under the counter one night because the oven felt like a hug. Then one morning it happens. The big letter, delivered in a sealed jar, floating in with the tide. It's a request. Not from a person, but from a museum. They want a recipe, just one. They ask for something soothing, historic, and slightly surreal. A biscuit that tells a pirate's story. You think long and hard. You need longer. You write and erase and scribble and sing to the dough. And finally you bake the compass crumb. Perfectly round biscuit. Star anise center. Clove and honey accents. Baked just long enough to hold together, but soft enough to fall apart with grace. You wrap it in waxed paper, tie it with linen thread, and include a single note. To be eaten slowly, with wonder. They never write back, but someone tells you it's on display under glass, next to a spyglass and a velvet glove. You smile. You bake another batch anyway, because the crumb and compass isn't about fame, or even food. It's about finding the soft places in hard people, the stillness inside a storm, the sweetness that salt only enhances. And now, as you stand on deck with doughy fingers and a rising sun behind you, you realize you never needed gold. You had biscuits. You had flour and fire and forgiveness. And maybe that's all you ever needed. The oven's off now. The sea rocks slow beneath your feet, like a giant breathing in its sleep. Above you, sails ripple like lullabies. The galley is quiet, just the lingering scent of cinnamon, toasted oats, and something faintly citrus that you can't quite name. Outside, the horizon stretches in soft watercolor. No rush, no storm, just time unfolding like parchment. You sit with a cooling biscuit in hand, still warm in the middle, sweet without trying. The kind you don't chew so much as listen to. Around you, the crew is already half dreaming. Someone's snoring under the flour sacks. Pastry Jack has dozed off beside a bowl of rising dough. Slab? Curled up with a biscuit on his chest like a cat with a favorite stone. You take a bite. It doesn't taste like gold, or battle, or empire. It tastes like home, whatever that means, wherever it drifts. The waves are slower now. A hush settles in your chest. No need to move, or speak, or even think. Just float in this soft pocket of quiet where the past hums gently, and the biscuits never burn. You lean back, close your eyes, let the crumbs fall where they may. Let the sea do the rocking, and maybe, just maybe, dream of the next batch.